I can't tell you how much I learned by entering image competition. I can't tell you how much I learned by failing, and having judges look at my image and say, I mean, the simplest things that now I would spot right away and that I just didn't spot. It's amazing the stuff you don't have an eye for when you are a photographer. I've done this 10, 15 years and still more than 15 years, and still I can show my image to somebody else and they'll point something out and I'll be like, "Oh my God." I had when I was still trying to get my wedding degree, I got that about 4 or 5 years ago, I guess. Um, and I was one of the I got it in like 3 years. I was one of the early people to get it. I'm proud of that. There you go. See, there's a reason. I'm proud of that. It took me like, 6 years to get my, master photographers, but it only took me 3 years to get wedding, and I'm proud of that. And then, I sent an image off to a friend who was a judge. She was on Jessica. She was on the panel this year. She was on IPC's, Big Show Saturday Night panel, and I sent her an image and I said, "I'm thinking about entering this. What do you think?" And she came back and she said, "Well, the bride's dress is pink." And I was like, "Oh my God." You're standing in a ballroom and there's pink uplighting and her dress is tinted pink. How did I not see that?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so obvious. How did I not see that? And then I had to go in there, correct the white balance, get a brush, and completely paint her entire dress to get it back to where it was white. And then it's like, how many other things are in this image that I didn't see? So the more that happens to you, the more you don't forget it. You're like, okay, make sure your horizon line is even. Make sure that there's no color tint on the dress. Make sure, about this, make sure with posing, make sure if it bends, bend it. Make sure, the head tilt with the couple, the heads should be tilted towards each other just a little bit because that shows love. Uh, you know, just all the little things. And you get that from competition because your ordinary clients, they don't know that stuff and they don't notice it. You do enough competition, you get to the point where you show someone a picture, like a client, and they go, "Oh, that's the best picture." And in your head, you're going, "No, it's not. There's 5 things wrong with that picture. I can tell you what the 5 things are. I'm not gonna tell you what the 5 things are because you don't see them and you don't and I don't want you to see them. But I can just look at it and see 5 things that are wrong with it." And that's what pushes you to be a better photographer. So competition will absolutely make you an incredible photographer.
It also sounds like you really have to be able to leave your ego outside the door.
Yeah, you absolutely do. You have to be prepared that the image that you thought was the worst of your images is judged the best, and the image that you thought was the best is judged the worst. And the best thing you can do is have someone else pick your images for you. That's what I used to do. I'd put
Right.
together like
Yeah.
10, 15 images, and I would send them to like 4 different people who were all really good and say, "Send me back the best 5." And then I would go from those, and I would pick the final like 4. I there's so much. I had an image that I entered 3 times. I entered it 3 years in a row because I wouldn't give up on it. Didn't change it a bit. The same image, same title, same everything. And what happened was there was no photojournalism reportage category at the time. I entered it the first year, nothing. I entered it the second year, no merit. The third year, they had a reportage category. I entered it again, it merited and it loaned. I got 2 merits for it because now there was a category where it was being looked at and judged for what it was instead of being judged against, you know, and again, back then you weren't being judged against another image, but still, if they're looking at portraits and landscapes and then your reportage image comes up, it throws them a little bit. One of the great things about IPC now is that that doesn't happen. When you're in the not until the geo round. When you're in the category round, you're only going up against other images that are your type of image. Landscapes are going against landscapes. So I think it's a much more effective way to judge.
I think sometimes, for a lot of people might be thinking, "Oh, I'm just not good enough to enter competitions, so I won't enter." Would you say entering photo competitions is something that maybe beginners should consider?
At the IPC level, it depends. I mean, there's beginners and there's beginners. The first time I ever entered, I went 4 for 4. This makes me sound like I'm bragging, saying I'm one of these. No, uh, The first time I entered, I went 4 for 4, and then, the next year I went 0, and I see people when I judge local competitions, you'll see people who are entering for the first time, and they'll come out of the gate gangbusters, and then you'll see other people who enter an image, and you're just like, how could you possibly have thought that that was gonna like, have you never looked at imaging competition before? Look, you literally you see some stuff that's like a snapshot with a phone, and you're just like, can't you see the highlights are blown out? The composition is bad, and the focus is poor, and the pose, and there's 20 things wrong with this image. Literally, like it wouldn't be a good picture if my kids took it. And so it really depends on you. You have to look at your work, and you have to look at what goes in the imaging competition and be able to see the difference, be able to see where you need to improve. Talk to someone else. I can't tell you how important it is to talk to someone else. I get people who send me pictures every year. Have someone else give you a brutally honest assessment of your work in terms of photographic competition. And always remember that your ability to do well in photographic competition does not validate your performance as a professional photographer. I had a woman that I was, at WPVI several years ago. They had a they have a thing there where you can sit down with someone for like 30 minutes and they'll go through your portfolio with you. So I went through her portfolio and I asked her how she was doing and how her business was doing, and she was doing great, gangbusters. And she was obviously upset. And then we ran out of time, but because she was having a hard time articulating uh, what her concerns were. And she was my last one of the day. So I said, come over here. We're in the trade show. I said, come over here. Let me talk to you. So we went over there and I said, okay, what's the problem? And she said, well, I'm, I, I can't, I'm not doing good in competition at all. I said, okay. She said, and so I don't think I'm a good photographer. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Do you like your work? Yeah. Do your clients like your work? Yeah. Do they pay you money for your work? Yes. Congratulations, you're a
Mm.
good photographer. Competition is its own animal. Competition, I'm a good driver. Doesn't mean I should be driving in a race. you know, you don't have to be a race car driver to be a good driver. And the majority of us only need to be a good driver in this world. We only need to be a good photographer in this world to be professional and to make a living at it, to make our clients happy, to support our families. So it's just two totally different tiers. So if you want to go to that tier, you gotta devote yourself to it. You gotta say, okay, I'm really gonna devote myself into learning what the judges look for and learning how to see that thing myself, and then make those changes as I'm working and make those changes in post processing. And if you do that, all of that skill will then trickle down into your day-to-day work. And suddenly you'll notice your day-to-day work is much better.
Would you say it's a good idea to tailor your image to the competition, or just submit your best work regardless?
I'm a purist. Uh, I used to say, I don't like when people shoot specifically for competition. One of the problems I had before we had the wedding degree, and I was a huge advocate for the wedding degree at PPA. One of the problems I had was that the bar for what was an 80 and above, that's a merit, was set by portraiture because there was so much of it. And it was an unfair hurdle to give to the wedding photographers. A portrait photographer a portrait photographer takes their daughter into the studio and does 300 frames until they get a picture that can merit. They dress their daughter. They can take all day because it's their daughter. They can try different lights, different background. They can do everything they want all day long until they find an image that's going to merit for them. A wedding photographer can't do that. We don't control the location. We don't control the light, and we're bringing our own light, but still we have to work with what the light that's there. We don't control what the bride and groom are wearing. We don't get to pick those models. We're on a time limit. I'm like, you can't let that be what sets the bar and then compare it to weddings. Uh, that being said, if there are some categories, if you could compete in weddings, for example, it's great. It's day of wedding, so everyone's kind of on the same surface there. But if you want to compete in something like portraiture, if you're producing portraiture, every day for your clients that's good enough to merit, good enough to make it to the final 16, great. But a lot of people aren't, you know?
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip, then press here for the full episode in glorious Technicolor. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe.